Most people think first impressions are just first guesses, something temporary, something that can be corrected later. But psychology says something far more uncomfortable. In many cases, your first impression becomes your permanent identity in someone else's mind. Even if you change, even if you grow, even if you prove them wrong, their brain often refuses to update the original version of you. Why does this happen? And more importantly, can you change it? What a first impression really is. You meet someone for the first time, maybe for just a few seconds. You say a few words. You make a small gesture. You don't even realize it. But in that moment, something powerful happens. Their brain quietly decides who you are. Not based on truth, not based on your full personality, not based on your past or intentions, but based on a rapid mental shortcut. And once that shortcut is created, it starts shaping everything they think about you afterward. So the real question is, what exactly is a first impression, and why does it feel so final? The real definition of first impression. A first impression is not a conversation result. It is not a full evaluation. It is a split-second psychological judgment your brain makes about another person's safety, confidence, status, emotional energy, and trustworthiness, all within moments of interaction. The brain is not trying to be accurate here. It is trying to be fast and efficient, because in human evolution, speed mattered more than correctness. Is this person safe? Is this person a threat? Should I approach or avoid? That's the real system running in the background. Why the brain creates first impressions. Your brain is constantly processing too much information. Facial expressions, tone, movement, words, silence, energy. If it tried to analyze everything deeply every time, it would slow down completely. So instead, it uses something called cognitive shortcuts. These shortcuts create instant conclusions like, this person seems confident, this person seems nervous, this person feels dominant, this person feels unsure. And the key point is this: these conclusions are made before you even finish your interaction. It's not about what you say. Most people think first impressions are based on words, but psychology says otherwise. Words are only a small part of it. What actually matters more is how you say it, your tone of voice, your facial expression, your eye contact, your posture, your energy level. Someone can say the perfect sentence, but if their energy feels uncertain, the impression will still be negative, because people don't trust language first. They trust signals, the power of nonverbal signals. Before a single word is processed, the brain already reads confidence or insecurity, dominance or submission, openness or resistance, calmness or tension. And here's the important truth. People are not consciously analyzing this. It happens automatically. Your body is speaking before your mouth does, and the listener's brain is already forming an opinion before your message even finishes. Why it happens so fast? The brain is designed for survival, not social accuracy. In ancient environments, humans had to quickly decide, is this person safe or dangerous? That system still exists today. So instead of slowly analyzing someone, the brain compresses all available information into a single emotional conclusion. That conclusion becomes the first impression. And once it forms, it starts acting like a filter for everything that comes next. The first version effect. Once someone forms a first impression of you, their brain creates a mental version of you. Think of it like a file saved in their mind. That file contains how they think you behave, how they think you speak, how they think you react, how they think you feel, and every future interaction gets compared to that file. So if you act differently later, the brain doesn't instantly update the file. Instead, it says, this behavior doesn't match what I already know. That's why first impressions feel so powerful. Emotion creates the impression. Another key truth: first impressions are not built on logic. They are built on emotion in the moment. That emotional signal becomes the foundation of your image in their mind. And emotions are sticky. They don't fade easily. Why it feels like you never get a second chance. Technically, people can change their opinion, but psychologically, the brain prefers to protect its first conclusion, because updating opinions takes mental effort. So instead of rewriting the impression, the brain often ignores new information, reinterprets behavior, or minimizes change. This is why people often say, "I still see them the same way," even after time has passed. The truth most people don't realize: a first impression is not who you are. It is not your personality. It is not your full identity. It is simply how your presence was interpreted in a moment of uncertainty. An interpretation is not always accurate, but it is powerful, because once it forms, it becomes the reference point for everything that follows. A first impression is not about perfection. It is about signals, not about saying the right things, but about creating the right emotional clarity in the moment. Because in the end, people don't remember every word you said. They remember the feeling you left behind in the first interaction. And that feeling becomes the beginning of your story in their mind. Why the brain sticks to first impressions. Have you ever noticed something strange? Someone meets you once, and after that, their behavior toward you feels fixed. Even if you change your attitude, even if you improve, even if you show a different side of yourself, they still treat you like that first version of you. It feels unfair. It feels rigid. Almost like people refuse to update their opinion. But the truth is deeper than stubbornness. It's psychology, and your brain is actually designed to do this. The brain doesn't care about fairness. The human brain is not built to be perfectly accurate. It is built to be fast. In social situations, speed matters more than correctness. Because in early human history, you didn't have time to deeply analyze every stranger. You had to decide quickly: friend or threat, safe or dangerous, trust or avoid. So the brain developed a system: make a fast judgment first, and refine later if needed. But here's the problem. Most of the time, the brain never fully updates that first judgment. The energy-saving system. One of the biggest reasons the brain sticks to first impressions is simple: mental efficiency. Updating an opinion requires effort. The brain has to reconsider past memories, reevaluate behavior, process new evidence, and rebuild a mental model. That takes energy. So instead of doing all that work, the brain chooses the easier path. Stick with what I already decided. This is called cognitive efficiency. But in real life, it looks like stubborn perception, seeing what you expect to see. Once a first impression is formed, the brain becomes selective. It starts noticing only what confirms the original belief. If someone thinks you are confident, they notice your strong moments. Awkward, they notice your nervous moments. Rude, they notice your neutral behavior as negative. This is not intentional. It is automatic filtering. The brain is not asking, "What is the truth?" It is asking, "Does this match what I already believe?" And that's why first impressions become self-reinforcing. The first image becomes the reference. Psychologically, the first piece of information you receive about someone becomes an anchor. That anchor becomes the reference point for everything later. So if the first impression is positive, everything later feels normal or good. Negative, everything later feels not enough to fix it. Even strong improvement can feel small compared to the original anchor, because the brain measures change against the first version, not reality. Emotional memory is stronger than logic. Another powerful reason: the brain remembers emotion more than facts. If the first interaction created a feeling like discomfort, awkwardness, admiration, confidence, tension, that emotional state gets stored deeply. And later, even if new logical evidence appears, the emotional memory still dominates interpretation. because emotion is processed faster and stored stronger than reasoning. Identity protection, the ego factor. There is also a hidden psychological reason. People don't like being wrong about their judgments. If someone has already decided who you are, changing that opinion means admitting, I misunderstood this person, and the brain resists that discomfort. So instead of updating the belief, it does something easier, justifies the original impression, reinterprets new behavior, or ignores contradictory evidence. This protects internal consistency, but it locks the first impression in place. Low attention for evaluation. Another key factor, people don't continuously reevaluate others. Once a quick judgment is made, attention moves on. Unless something very strong disrupts the pattern, the brain stops actively analyzing you, so your file in their mind remains mostly unchanged. Not because they are thinking about you, but because they are not thinking deeply about you at all. Why change feels impossible? This is where most people get confused. They think, if I act differently, people will instantly see it. But psychology says, new behavior does not overwrite old perception immediately. It has to compete with memory, emotion, bias, and identity labels. So change does happen, but slowly, through repetition, through consistency, through time. The brain sticks to first impressions, not because it is unfair, but because it is efficient. It prioritizes speed over accuracy, familiarity over correction, stability over constant revision. And once a first impression is formed, it becomes the default lens for interpretation. Not permanent, but powerful enough to resist change. The label effect. Once someone sees you a certain way, something strange happens. You can change your behavior. You can improve your communication. You can grow as a person. But in their mind, you still feel the same. It's like they are not reacting to who you are today. They are reacting to a label they already placed on you. And the most dangerous part, most people don't even realize they are living inside a label. What the label effect really is. The label effect is a psychological phenomenon where a single impression becomes a fixed identity in someone's mind. It works like this. Once someone defines you as something, shy, confident, rude, funny, weak, intelligent, that label becomes a mental shortcut. And from that moment on, they stop seeing you as a changing person. They start seeing you as a category, not a human being with layers. How labels are created. Labels are not created through deep understanding. They are created through early interpretation. One moment can define the entire label. One awkward interaction, he is shy. One confident moment, she is dominant. One emotional reaction, he is unstable. One mistake, he is careless. The brain takes a small sample and expands it into a full identity because it doesn't want complexity. It wants simplicity. Why the brain loves labels. Labels make life easier for the brain. Instead of constantly reanalyzing someone, the brain says, I already know what this person is. This saves mental energy. So the brain builds shortcuts like, this person is trustworthy. This person is not serious. This person is confident. And once that shortcut is built, it becomes the default filter for everything you do. How labels change perception. Here's where it gets powerful. After a label is formed, people don't see your behavior objectively anymore. They interpret it through the label. For example, if you are labeled as quiet, speaking confidently, he's trying too hard. If you are labeled as confident, being silent, he's calm and powerful. Being unsure, he's just thinking deeply. Same behavior, different interpretation, because the label is controlling the meaning. The filter effect. Once a label exists, it becomes a filter. Everything you do passes through it. The brain no longer asks, what does this action mean? Instead it asks, how does this fit the label I already assigned? And if it doesn't fit, the brain doesn't update the label. It adjusts the meaning. This is why people often misread your growth, not because they can't see it, but because they are seeing it through an old definition of you. Why people resist changing labels. Changing a label requires mental effort, because it means admitting, I misunderstood this person, and the brain resists that feeling. So instead of updating the label, it does something easier, ignores new behavior, minimizes change, or explains it away. For example, if someone thinks you are rude, even when you are polite later, they may think, he is just acting nice today. That's not his real personality. The old label survives. The self-fulfilling loop. The label effect doesn't only affect how others see you, it also changes how they behave toward you. And that behavior influences how you respond, which then reinforces the original label. Example, if someone believes you are quiet, they interrupt you more. They give you less attention. They expect less from you, so you speak less, and the label becomes confirmed. This is a psychological loop, not truth. Reinforced perception. The harsh truth about labels. Once a strong label is formed, words alone are weak. You cannot break it with explanation, because explanation fights belief, and belief is stronger than logic. So people don't update labels through conversation. They update them through consistent behavior, repeated evidence, emotional disruption of expectation. Only when reality becomes too strong to ignore does the label begin to weaken. Can labels be changed? Yes, but not quickly. The brain needs repeated contradictions to break a label. Not one moment, not one performance, but consistent new patterns. Because the brain updates slowly to avoid confusion. So over time, if your behavior stays consistent, the old label starts to weaken, and a new one slowly forms. The label effect is not about who you are. It is about how the brain simplifies you. Once a label is assigned, you stop being fully seen and start being interpreted through a fixed mental frame. But the important truth is this: labels are not reality. They are just mental shortcuts that pretend to be truth. And the more consistent you are, the more those shortcuts eventually collapse. Emotional memory is stronger than logic. Here's something most people don't realize. People don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. If your first interaction created discomfort, insecurity, attraction, respect, that emotional imprint becomes the anchor, and later evidence rarely replaces it, because emotion beats logic in human memory. Every time. The power of the first 7 seconds. Research shows that people form impressions in seconds, sometimes even faster. In that short time, your brain is being judged on energy, facial expression, posture, confidence signals, microreactions. And here's the harsh truth: you don't get judged on your best moment. You get judged on your first available moment. That's the version of you that gets stored. Even when people see new evidence about you, something blocks the update, because changing opinion means, I was wrong about this person, and the human ego hates being wrong. So instead of updating you, the mind chooses excuses, reinterpretation, selective memory. This is why someone can know you for months, but still treat you based on day one. Can first impressions be changed? Yes, but not easily. You cannot overwrite a first impression with words. You overwrite it with repeated emotional evidence. Not one moment, not one explanation, but consistent behavior over time. And there is a pattern. People only update their opinion when the new version of you becomes too strong to ignore. That means consistent confidence, consistent behavior, consistent energy shift. No emotional inconsistency. Eventually, the brain is forced to rebuild the file. But until then, the old version stays active. The strategy most people miss. Most people try to change impressions by explaining themselves, defending their personality, proving they are different. But psychology says this rarely works, because explanation is weak. Behavior is strong. Silence plus consistency changes perception faster than words ever will. First impressions are powerful, but they are not about truth. They are about interpretation under uncertainty. And once that interpretation is created, the brain protects it, not because it is right, but because it is familiar. And humans trust what they already believe more than what they newly see. So the real lesson is this: you don't control what people see in the first moment, but you do control whether they can stay wrong about you. First impressions are not just moments. They are mental shortcuts that shape relationships, opportunities, and trust. And once they form, they don't disappear easily. They either weaken slowly, or they stay forever. So the real power is not in changing people's first impression. It's in becoming consistent enough that the first impression eventually becomes irrelevant.